أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما كان المؤمنون لينفروا كافة فلولا نفر من كل فرقة منهم طائفة ليتفقهوا في الدين ولينذر قومهم إذا رجعوا إليهم لعلهم يحذرون. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. Your second salawat from Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat for ta'ajil faraj sahib al-asri wal zaman.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
ماجورين إن شاء الله أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بذكر المسائب آل محمد. Alhamdulillah, over the course of the past 12 nights now, we've discussed regarding the issue of justice. We've recited the Masa'ib of Ali Muhammad, and we've partook in the commemoration of these difficult nights on the family of Ali Muhammad. May Allah increase in our reward for that. Tonight, on the basis of this verse of the Holy Quran, we began our discussion with, which is the 122nd verse of Surah At-Tawbah, in which Allah says it's not up to the believers that they can all move all together at the same time. So why doesn't one amongst them be appointed to go and to study in the religion and then return back to them? And if he returns back, to warn them. The instruction of this verse tells us that while it's the interest of everyone to earn and to learn the religion of Islam and to learn about their faith and their identity, it's not always possible for everyone to move all together and to leave everything that they have and to go study about their faith. And that rather, that it's good to appoint someone from amongst ourselves to go through this process, to come back, and if they come back, إِذَا رَجَعُوا, that if they come back to the community, that they warn the community and prepare the community and train the community. Such there are some points of advice pertaining to our community and from the lessons of Karbala that are worth to note, that I'd like to share with you in 3 points as simply as we can, with your loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa ajil faraj.
The first of these discussions is on the concept of community and the importance of community. When we look at our community, many times we ask the question, what came for us? The same way when we look for the month of Muharram, we want to see who's coming for the month of Muharram. But as we develop a community, one of the important conversations to have is, who did we send for the cause of the Imam? That are we preparing for our generations to look at and to see who is going to lift the mantle from our community for the sake of the Imam? Who is it that's going to go from us that's going to be the representative of working for the Imam? The idea of a community coming together and working together is one of the most important fundamentals. And one of the difficult ways of understanding how significant this community is that if I was to give you an example. You guys are okay? Example? All right. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Habib is over here. Habib is a mu'min. Habib loves Ahlul Bayt. Loves Allah. Habib does many good things. Habib comes to Majlis. Habib cries for Imam Hussain. Habib goes to Hajj. When he goes to Hajj, he inadvertently disrespects the Kaaba. Whether Na'uzu billah. For example, he is doing tawaf and he vomits and it falls on the Kaaba. Would we believe that Habib deserves to be reprimanded for this action? Most of us would want to, right? Or let's say, for example, he intentionally takes out his cell phone and he starts having a conversation, taking selfies. More likely to happen than an accidental vomit. Is this appropriate? Is this the respect of the tawaf? No, it's not the respect of the tawaf. Does Habib deserve to be reprimanded? We would think so, right? But now understand something. There's a statement of our sixth Imam where he says, Al-mu'minu a'zamu hurmatan anil Ka'bah. That the dignity and respect of a mu'min is greater than that of the Kaaba. If we could understand this one statement, we would understand that when we build a community, one of the most important things that we have is this concept of living and working together and respecting and sanctifying each other's dignity. Now, the most important thing, the mistake is to the side, even if it's intentional. We have to play it down to keep the respect of one another and keep that community working together. And these aspects, especially as our community grows, is giving one another the benefit of the doubt. Is allowing for instances where, for example, I may feel that I have been offended or something has been abused or done unintentionally. Give them a chance and understanding how to work together and how to spend time together and how to communicate well. There is an aspect of community building that actually our ulama and our maraja have recommended that this is the way you build a good community and this is the way you build a good marriage. It's very difficult. But if you're married, you should remember this. And if you're a part of a community, you should also remember it. The explanation comes, look at your good deeds as small and look at the other good person's good deeds as big. Look at your sins and mistakes as great and look at the mistakes of the other person as small and insignificant. This is the opposite of the human ego. The human ego wants, when I do something good, everybody should know. Everybody should appreciate me. Everybody should know all the wonderful things that I do. And when I make a mistake, so what? I made one mistake. Don't you know of all the good things that I do? And on the other hand, when someone does something nice for us, our natural desire is to say, so what? And when they do something bad, we want to crucify them. We want to abuse them. But Islam says, do the opposite of what your ego desires, and you will build brotherhood and community. The opposite of our desire is what? Our initial desire is that my things should be acknowledged. No, downplay your goodnesses. If they are good, Allah will expose them. You don't need to tell anyone. Allah will bring them forward. And make your mistakes big so that you're focused on self-improvement, not criticism of those around you. Many times what happens is we see something bad, we see something wrong, we know immediately want to point it out. Habib. Habib is our example for today. Habib, what are you doing? Instead of realizing, no, this is his mistake, it's okay. We can overlook this mistake. When we can do the opposite of what our ego desires, we build a community and we build healthy relationships. All of our healthy relationships in our life, including our marriage, with our children, with our families, are built on the same fundamental. Someone does something kind for you, think they gave you the world. Someone makes a mistake, ignore it as if it's nothing. You make a mistake, be adamant to seek apology. Be adamant to correct the behavior. When you do something good, it's okay. They acknowledged it, they didn't. My intention wasn't for you, my intention was for the sake of Allah. Allah doesn't forget anything. Allah doesn't leave anything. So in this way, when we look at this, in the process of, inshallah, as this community grows, and alhamdulillah, from 2 years till today, this community has grown a lot. But the best way of keeping that brotherhood is the acknowledgement of the ihtaram of one another and of the overlooking of flaws and of giving them more than we can and appreciating what it is that others do for us.
Narai Takbir, Allah. Narai Risalat. Nara Haidari.
Ali.
Bar Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad Salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The second point, which is a very important point, talks about the importance of this salat and prayers. One of the important things and values that is espoused here and believed in is the Salatul Jama'ah. Salatul Jama'ah is one of the most important resources that we have. It is one of the biggest ways of attaining a barakah that otherwise you could not attain. Our eighth Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida alayhi salam, in one of his advices, he explains, I advise you to keep to this prayers in jama'ah. 1 rakat in jama'ah is equal to 2,000 rakat prayed elsewhere. 2,000 rakat. There are narrations that say that when 5 believers get together to pray Salat al-Jama'ah, the amount of angels that join them are uncountable. 5. The preference of this prayer and giving it its importance is that this is the message of Imam Hussain. You see, when there is a cause, there are many people willing to protest for the cause. Some protest because they believe in it. Some protest because it's convenient. Some protest because the activity of community coming together is valuable to them. All these are very important qualities in a protest. But the benefit of the protest goes to the one who actually follows the cause. The matam that we do, the sina zani that we do, this latam that we do, is the protest in the cause of the imam. If you look at the history of where this originates from, the traditions of, for example, even beating the chest or of beating the self to acknowledge was accompanied with poetry in open protest. If you look even now, the latmiya that we recite, the noha that we recite, there are explanations of the oppression that we are standing against. That, oh people, listen to the oppression. This was a bad thing that was done. This is our protest. But to receive the benefit of that protest, you have to be one of the people who participates in the cause. The cause is this salat. One of the interesting discussions that comes up is to say that the majlis of Imam Hussain does shifa, 100%. No disagreement. But understand something. To be entitled to that shifa'ah, the Imam has to be able to see you. The way we discussed that Allah has set up a filing system, that your file opens the moment you die. Your file opens and you decide which Imam you will be placed with on the Day of Judgment. The Day of Judgment, you are raised with that Imam. That Imam can only acknowledge the people that are raised with him. If we haven't laid the fundamentals, we can't get to that point where the Imam can do our shifa. Which is why the final words of our 6th Imam, Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq alayhi salam. The significance of this statement is very important because the Imam is the one who established Madhab Ja'fari. He established a way to differentiate those who are the true followers of Ahlul Bayt than all the others. He explained the fiqh to explain that if you are a follower of Madhab Ja'fari, what do you do? That Imam who identified and clarified the lines between the madhahib to explain who we are as followers of Ahlul Bayt, his final words, as explained, were to say, لا ينال شفاعتنا مستخفا للصلاة. Final words of the Imam are what? That our intercession will not reach the one who takes prayers lightly. Not that doesn't pray. The Imam's not saying that doesn't pray. The Imam is saying one who takes prayers lightly. Meaning we don't give it its significance and its importance. Today it's difficult. We have within ourselves the passion. We are in the middle of expressing our passion for Ahlul Bayt. To stop for Salat, this is a very important thing. It has a deep meaning to it. And to appreciate that meaning, one has to invest in this Salat. One of the things that I explain very often is if at the age of 40, you're praying the same way as you did when you were praying when you were 15, you're doing something wrong. Every professional career that exists, that has value to it, that appoints itself a career, whether in the medical field, legal field, engineering, accounting, has a process of what's called continuing education. The argument of continuing education is that if you want to keep yourself as a member of this profession, you have to keep learning about this profession so that you are qualified for today's values and responsibilities to execute your job in the best of manners. Why is it that professionally we can understand I need to keep investing in my learning and my knowledge, but when it comes to my faith and my Islam, what I learned from madrasa when I was a child should be enough to last me for the rest of my life? It's a mistake. The aspect of even salat requires someone to invest in it, to learn about it, to learn its secrets, to learn its values and its philosophy, to beautify and adorn it as we get older, to learn more about it, that this is my signature. This is what identifies me in the world, that I pray to Allah. So what does that salat look like? If it's not something I invest in that prayer, then how can I say this is my identity? So why? One of the interesting points in the concept of salat and this discussion of salat is the ta'qibat. Ta'qibat are those mustahabbat that are recommended to perform after we complete our salah. The most important ta'qibat of salat. Most important ta'qibat of salat. Anyone want to try? Tasbihat al-Zahra, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In Mafatihul Jinan, when it comes to ta'qibat of salat, the first thing that Sheikh Abbas Qumi mentions is he says it's tasbih. If you do nothing else after your prayers, just do this tasbih. The Ahlul Bayt would teach, we teach our children to recite tasbih the way you teach your children to pray. It's that important. The Imam explains, he says, I wonder about you people. You came to the door and you didn't open it and you walked away. Said, what do you mean? How is this possible? The Imam explains, he says, when you come to the condition of prayer, you have come to ask Allah for your hajat. Every salat, if you ask Allah, this is why we make dua after salat, is because what I did was in this prayer is I took everything away from me and I brought my focus back to Allah. Now I'm in a condition where I have communicated with Allah, I have removed the barriers, I have returned to His mercy. I came to the door. And the Imam says, without opening it, you walked away. Said, Ya Rasulullah, what does it mean to open the door? The Imam explains the recitation of this tasbih is the opening of the door to the answering for your hajat. Whatever you want from Allah, come to Allah through salat, purify yourself, then open the door by the recitation of tasbih, then raise your hands in dua. The most valuable of these actions that we possess is this tasbih. It is something very important to make sure that it's one of the first things. As soon as we finish our salat, move to this tasbih as quickly as possible. The Ahlul Bayt would explain that we perform this tasbih before we do anything else, so that we are subject of Allah's mercy before we move.
Nara takbir. Allah. Nara risalat. Nara Haidari. Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. On concentration in prayer, there's one final point that I'll make. There is, Al-Imam Majlisi narrates a situation where a narrator is sitting with our sixth Imam, and he says, I saw three people come to the Imam, ask the same question, and the Imam gave a different answer to each person. The first person came, said, Ya Rasulullah, how do I increase my concentration in salat? Imam said, focus on your place of sujood. Second person came, Ya Rasulullah, how do I increase my concentration in salat? The Imam said, pray as if it's your last prayer you're ever going to recite. Third person came, said, Ya Rasulullah, how do I increase my concentration in prayer? Imam replied, pray in such a way as if you can see Allah, but to acknowledge that while you can't see Him, He is looking at you. Why did the Imam give three different answers? It's because those three people were at different levels. The Imam is someone who does not answer at his level. The Imam is someone who answers the questioner at the ability of the questioner to understand. So the Imam is explaining and he's elaborating and structuring a process by which one increases their ma'rifah and understanding of how to perform their salah. The Imam goes, his first answer is pray and focus on your place of sujood. We have physical distractions around us. That don't be distracted by what's around you. Focus in one place so that physical distractions don't bother you. Once we've gotten to the point that I'm not being distracted by what's physically around me, the Imam moves to the second level of removing mental distractions. How many times has it been you stand up for prayer and you immediately start thinking about what am I going to do after this? What are all of the responsibilities I still have to do? What are the tasks that I have to complete? The Imam is removing the process of mental distraction by saying, pray in such a way, there is nothing to do after this. You have no life after this. You're dead. If this is the last thing I'm going to do, it's going to remove all of the mental distractions of, oh, I should be thinking about who called me, who do I have to answer, what are the things I still haven't done today, what other obligations and tasks that I have left. All of these points that come to the mind, the Imam says to wipe these away. Think that this is the last action I'm going to perform and I'm going to die immediately after this. All of your mental distractions, anything that comes to your mind, you're going to say to yourself, what's the point? There's nothing after this. And that focus will help give us mental clarity so that both physically we are now focused, mentally we are focused. What's the third thing the Imam does? The Imam gives instruction to remove the ego from Salah. That when I'm standing there and I'm thinking, how good do I look praying, huh? How perfect is my ruku'? I wish someone was watching my sajda. It's a natural tendency that this ego within us has a desire to grow. But if the one who was asking me to perform this action was in front of me and judging me, I would become conscious of the fact that am I doing better than I should be doing? So the Imam says, focus in such a way that it is if Allah is watching you offer him this prayer right now. Would Allah accept it? Would Allah take this from you? Or are you so busy in your own, I look so good in this salat, or my hair is blowing just right as I do sajda, or that no one else prays as long as I do, look how long my ruku is? Or would my focus shift from what I feel about myself to what I feel about the one to whom I am presenting this salat? Our third point for tonight, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This is sirrun min asrar Karbala, a secret from amongst the secrets of Karbala. Karbala does not have secrets in the sense that there are things that people are not told about Karbala. No, the waqi' of Karbala is present before everyone. And it is presented the same way every year. If someone should come to you and tell you something completely different that you've never heard about the waqi' of Karbala, you should question that person. Where did this come from? There's nothing wrong with asking that question respectfully. But the secrets of Karbala, when we mention them, are those events in Karbala that while everybody can listen to it, not everybody will notice the reality behind the story. One of the most significant and important realities of the waqi' of Karbala is the significance and the importance and the community involvement in the concept of hijab. I want you to think about something. Ashura has just passed. For the next 40 days until Arba'in, if not longer, we will cry. We will hold majalis. We will invite each other to one another's houses. And we will commemorate for 40 days at the very least, if not longer. Why? Is it because the head of Imam Hussain was raised on a spear? That head on the spear wept over the hijab of Zainab. The masa'ib of Ali Muhammad that they wanted to prevent was the disrespect of this hijab. When our fourth Imam Ali ibn al-Hussain Zainul Abidin alayhi salam was asked what was the most difficult event What was the most harsh reality you had to face in this waqi' of Karbala? Ash-Sham, Ash-Sham, Ash-Sham. Why? Because the lack of dignity and respect and modesty that was taken from the women. That was the most difficult thing to bear. The point in mentioning this is that this story of hijab that exists in this waqi' of Karbala, if you pay attention to Ziyarat-i-Nahiya is a ziyarat for Imam Hussain taught to us by our 12th Imam. There are some masa'ib, some of the difficulties that befell Imam Hussain that we wouldn't know about without this ziyarat. If you want to learn about the masa'ib of what happened in Karbala, read what Imam Zaman writes about it. One of the significant points that he writes about the time of the shahadat of the Imam, he says, "My salam upon the one who, when the sweat of death overtook his brow," meaning he was in the final moments of his death, he continued to open and close his hands. Why? Why? Imam Hussain, in the most difficult moment of his life, is continuing to move. And the Imam continues to explain why. And he says, in that moment, you would secretly look to your tents to make sure that they were preserved. The Imam knows that what will happen after his shahadat, that the women will be looted, they will be taken as prisoners. He has prepared them for this. In one of the last discussions that Imam has with the women of his family, he says to them, prepare yourselves for difficulties now. Allah has desired to see you as prisoners, but Allah will bring your affair to a correct and completion and will protect you. He's prepared them. But to delay that difficulty for them, the Imam takes more pain and difficulty upon himself. One of the explanations of this significance is to understand that hijab is not just for the women. That's a woman's problem. No, it is the dignity of the men that is preserved in the hijab of their women. Imam Hussain reciting Quran from a spear after he was beheaded is why? So that people would look to him and not to the women who are being paraded through the market. The modesty of the women is something that we have to teach, both teach and preserve. That if we're not teaching our women that this is the correct path, and that's it. Hijab in this country is under attack. Whether it's the physical hijab or the ma'nawi hijab. The physical hijab is that we follow the instruction of the Quran and that covering is worn. The ma'nawi hijab is the concept of modesty that should be present. There is a desire within each of us to be seen. There is a desire within each of us to be acknowledged and appreciated. Allah has said that in women, what I have placed in them, that modesty is that what is that beautiful inside of them, whether physically or personally, is something that is reserved for those who are mahram for them. There's twofold to this. One is understanding that this is the obligation, and two, that we appreciate that. We acknowledge that, and we promote this concept of hijab, both physically and in the meaning of hijab, that it is something that is to be preserved. This concept is something that if you leave your children to this society, it doesn't exist here. They won't believe it. They will see it as oppression. But the truth is the hijab is beautiful. Why? Because the hijab gives personality. Let me explain what I mean by this. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The hijab forces the opposite gender and society to look at the content of character, not the physical appearance. Without this hijab, the reaction is, oh, are you young? Are you old? What is your color? What is your nationality? What is your appearance like? And then we make a decision how to interact with the person. When the hijab is present, Allah says, all of those things that I gave you as beauty, hide them in front of those who you have no relationship with, so that when they listen to you, the only thing they can react to is the content of your words, not your appearance. not your beauty. The benefit of hijab is that it's not a question anymore that's, oh, are you pretty? Are you not? Are you young? Are you old? Are you this? Are you that? No, no one has the right to judge you or look at you as anything other than what you choose to say from your mouth. This is the concept of hijab, that it gives identity to a person, true identity, not something that is temporal, that lasts for some time and then fades. And it insists that it gives security, that since no one can appreciate those attributes about you, no one can attack you for those attributes either. No one can trouble you for those attributes either. And the significance of it is that it is upon us as a community to promote, protect, and appreciate this quality, not just on the women. This is why the lessons of Karbala that came to us were on the preservation of this attribute. That when Imam Hussain is alone, that the Imam says, leave my women, let them go. My Imam defends the women and fights a limited battle where he can't battle freely. Why? So that he can ensure that the women are protected. He takes his greatest power that he possesses, Abul Fadl, and limits Abul Fadl from being able to attack to protect the women. All of these actions are a demonstration that if we were to have a priority as men, as a community, our priority begins with the concept of this preservation and dignity of hijab. More than us ourselves, it is us taking care of our families and giving them that protection. That's why this is a very important lesson, that to spend time to ponder over and to appreciate, we would no longer look at this as a women's issue. We would look at it as a community issue. Do we make sure that this hijab is preserved? Do we protect it? Do we ensure that we have honored it? Do we teach it? Do we support it? Or do we say, this is between you and your mother, go? That's not the message of Karbala. That's not one of the, and that's why the event of Karbala is in front of everyone. But do we realize this reality? That's one of the difficult questions that we have to ask. That's, are we taking this lesson and applying it in our lives? Are we paying attention to our salat? That if Abu Abdullah, at the end of his life, in the middle of the battle, when Abu Thamama comes to him and says, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, it is the time for prayers. Imam Hussain says, you have reminded me of prayers. May Allah forgive you and raise your status. Now, these are important factors that we have to pay attention to, and the honor and dignity that one another possesses, and may Allah accept from us all. The Masa'ib of Abu Abdullah did not end on the field of Karbala, but they continued afterwards in the difficulties that befell Ali Muhammad. One was the moment after which, when the next morning came, they wanted to abuse the women of Ali Muhammad even further. So they intended to parade them past the uncovered bodies of their families in the field of Karbala. In this moment, it was every mother who looked to her child, and Imam Zainul Abidin who looked to his father. Sayyidah Zainab says, "Oh Sajjad, why do I see you in such a condition that it is as if your soul is about to leave your body?" Imam Zainul Abidin is chained to the back of a camel in a state of sickness, and he calls out, "Oh aunt, how unfortunate that son who sees his father in this condition and can do nothing for him." Imam Zainul Abidin, what did you see? You saw the beheaded body of your father in pieces in the field of Karbala, under the open sun. They had stolen even the clothes off the body of your father. Imam Zainul Abidin was forced to leave in this way. For 3 days, the body of my Imam lay in the open field under the sun, until eventually the Banu Asad overcame their fear and came to the realization that the army of Umar Asad would not return. They came to these bodies in the field of Karbala, and they stood wondering, what do we do? A person is recognized by their face. None of these shuhada have any face for us to recognize. When they were worried, how will we determine what to be done? From a distance, they saw a rider coming alone. They wondered if this was one of the sentries of the army. They hid for some time until the rider came close and called out, "O Banu Asad, come out. I have come to help you complete this task." Banu Asad came. They recognized that this was Imam Zainul Abidin, who by the miracle of Nabuwwat, of Imamat, had left the prisons of Kufa and come back to this place to help bury the Shuhada. He went through and instructed, this is the grave where all of the companions and the children will be laid. He laid all of them in one grave, with the exception that he says, there are two graves I will make myself. One was the grave of Abu Abdullah. They describe when the Imam wanted to move the body of his father, that as he would lift from one side, the rest of the body would come apart in the other direction. He calls out, "Oh, Banu Asad, have you no cloth? Have you nothing to help me?" Imam gathered the parts of his father's body and prepared a grave. It was by the instruction of Abi Abdullah that at the feet of his grave, he said, "Put my son Akbar at the feet of my grave." Today, if you go to the Dhari of Abu Abdullah, may Allah give us all the tawfiq of his ziyarah, at the feet of Imam Hussain lays his son Akbar, which is why you see the shape to be different from that side. But there are three inside of this grave. One is Imam al-Hussein. One is his son Akbar. The third, if you remember, the Banu Asad said, there seems to be this piece of flesh, O Zainul Abidin. We don't know with which janaza it goes. Imam al-Sajjad wept. هذا أخي علي الأصغر. There was no one to protect him from being run over by horses. He was the other one after they raised him on a spear. When they ran horses over my father, they ran horses over my brother Ali al-Asghar. As the Imam collects this body and prepares it for burial, a call comes from the grave of Imam Hussein. Place him upon my chest. Put my Asghar upon my chest, O Sajjad. Imam Zainul Abidin buries Ali al-Asghar on the chest of Imam Hussein. Remember, after Arba'in, the head of only one shaheed was returned. The head of Abu Abdullah was returned after the event of Arba'in. That Asghar till today lies without his head on the chest of his father. How difficult for Imam Hussein, who could not leave him in the field of Karbala. They say till today, if you want to seek Allah's forgiveness, ask Abu Abdullah's intercession by the infant that sleeps on his chest. Ya Abu Abdullah, bihaqqi asghar, should give us shafa'ah. That one that you could not bear his separation, that you called from the grave for him. By his right, Abu Abdullah, do shafa'ah for us. When this was all completed, Imam Zainul Abidin, they said, we saw him move into the trees in one direction. He hugged some things to his chest and headed to the direction of Furat. Sometime later again, we saw him go into another direction. We asked him, Yabna Rasulullah, what are you taking? He says, I am collecting the arms of my uncle Abbas. Imam Zainul Abidin said, the second grave that I will make by myself is the grave of my uncle Abul Fadl. Abul Fadl al-Abbas was a warrior to be feared. Some of the descriptions write about Abul Fadl that when he would sit on a horse, his feet would touch the ground. His presence and his haybat was such that if you were an enemy and you saw a soldier sitting on a horse the way you sit, but his feet could touch the ground, and in the swing of his sword was a speed that could not be seen, you would run the other direction. When people saw this description, and then they went to go visit the grave of Abul Fadl, they said, what do you mean he was so tall? The grave is not 4 feet in length that you have made for Abul Fadl. The answer comes. The enemy was so afraid of Abbas that even after he became shaheed, they came with swords, they came with spears, they desecrated his body into pieces, lest that it should happen. Hussein would call, Abbas would rise again. Don't give him the chance. They cut him into pieces. That Imam Zain al-Abidin collected them, said, I will bring him to the grave alone. No one follow me. Imam Zain al-Abidin entered the grave. When a long time had passed, the Banu Asad became worried. My Imam is sick. He has been in the heat of the sun, burying his family. God forbid, maybe he lost consciousness. Maybe in this difficulty of collecting the pieces of his uncle, something has happened. They said, we looked in the grave. We saw Zainul Abidin hugging the body of Abul Fadl and crying, oh, uncle, where did you leave us? Oh, uncle, how the women call for you in the bazaar of Kufa. Oh, uncle, when they throw stones at them, everyone cries for you, oh, uncle. Why did you leave us in such a difficulty? I finish on the Shuja'at of Abul Fadl. They describe and say that when the tabarrukat were presented in front of Mal'un Yazid, there was a trunk of a tree that was brought in front of him that was charred and marked with arrows and burned except for two spaces. Yazid looked at these people and said, what did you bring me a tree from the field of Karbala? They said, oh Amir, la'natullahi alayh, this is not a tree. This is what remains of the alam of Abul Fadl. Yazid says, what of these two places that there is no arrow, no mark? They said, this is where Abul Fadl would place his hands when he held this alam. Yazid says, looking at the rest of this, he says, you mean to tell me he was so brave that the rest of this is burned and marked with arrows and wounds and stabs and swords, but where Abul Fadl held, he did not let go? They said, Amir, he did not let go until we cut his hands from his body. Mal'un said, I even then declare the bravery of this man. When those tabarrukat were returned to the women, there is a description in history that when this alam was returned, every lady came in and circled the alam and began to kiss the places of the hands of Abul Fadl and wept and cried, oh Abul Fadl, why did you leave us? Oh Abbas, what condition you have left us in. Oh Abbas, if you had been here, no one would have dared against us. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. ماتم يا حسين.